So I'm going to make a couple of points, and we will see whether or not they cohere with one another, and if so, how they do so. The first point I want to make concerns the respect that we have for politicians, for captains of industry, basically for the people for whom we generally have respect. And I do not include law enforcement in that category, nor do I include lawyers, and I think it will become clear why I include those people in the category of people for whom we do not really have any genuine respect. So, nothing is more common than to talk about what villains and psychopaths and misfits and substandard people politicians are. And yet, it is a fact that at the end of the day, they are accorded a lot of respect. They're accorded a lot of antipathy, but that's consistent with their being respected. I mean, if somebody is a hero to half of the population, then the other half of the population is likely to have sentiments of some kind about them or towards them, and those are very likely to be negative sentiments. In any case, so what is this about? Well, one thing, the obvious thing to say, of course, is that they don't deserve this respect, and they're goofs, and it's only because people are sheep or people are blinkered or some such that senior politicians are given respect. And sure, of course, that may be true. It's sort of tautologously true, but I think there's actually more legitimacy. I think that a lot of people who are given respect, genuinely given respect, actually are, after a fashion, deserving of it. And here's why. It is not easy to become a head of state, or even a state senator, or even a mayor. It is not something that just happens. It may not be that hard, but it is not something that just happens. It does not happen automatically. And what that means is that the person who has this office has to actually do something. They actually have to be agents. And what is really becoming apparent to me is that people, for the most part, are simply not agents. Now, it is true, many politicians are dumb and deeply mediocre in many important ways. They are often deeply mediocre in the very ways in which they are supposed to be mediocre. In which they are supposed to not be mediocre. That was a Freudian slip of epic proportions. That is true. Okay, so, and the mere fact that they had the wherewithal, the agency, the strengths or attributes of character to get into office does not mean that they have the attributes of intellect or of character to do the right thing once in office. However, it is not something that just happens. Now, let's say you become a police officer at the age of 18 or whatever, you don't really have to do, actually, I can say you don't have to do anything. In fact, being promoted within a bureaucracy is about not doing anything ever. 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 Okay, now oftentimes not doing anything involves doing something after a fashion. Okay, it involves obviously a certain amount of agency of a kind, a sort of very circumscribed agency is needed to not do anything in the right way. Okay, I mean, suppose that some police officer just got in his squad car and literally did nothing. He did nothing in the way in which a rock does nothing. Well, in that case, yeah, obviously he would not be promoted; he would be fired. But when you talk about doing nothing, that term has one meaning for a human being and a very different meaning for a rock and a different meaning for a dog, right? And in the case of a human being, doing nothing is not just sitting there, right? I mean, if somebody got into a squad car and literally just sat there without being dead, that would actually be a way of doing something. That would be like Buddha sitting under the tree, the lotus blossom or whatever tree, for a week. That would actually be a different thing altogether. So, in the relevant sense of the word "do," in order to be promoted within the police department, it is necessary and sufficient to do nothing. Nothing. Okay, and obviously apologists for that bureaucracy, and this is true of all bureaucracies, will talk about how you have to be creative, and those are lies. Those are simply lies. They're not half-truth, they're not eighth-truth, they're simply lies. Okay, to become a senior, kind of to rise within the ranks of a kind of religious bureaucracy, so obviously there are religious bureaucracies only where religions that have been around for a while and are rather stable are concerned. But to rise within the ranks of the church or whatever, you have to do nothing, literally nothing. Okay, this is a fact. To rise within the ranks of academia, you have to do nothing. There was once a time. Actually, I'm not sure this is true. Actually, but there was never actually a time when it was necessary to do something in order to climb the ranks of academia. But there have been times, that time is over, utterly over, but there have been times when it was possible, when doing something was actually a way, or at least a component of a way of rising, of climbing the ranks within academia. But in order to become, somebody is the, so-and-so professor of history or whatever at some place, it means something, but very little, and what it means is that they had the intelligence to do nothing in the relevant way. Okay, it's in order to be able to do nothing in the way in which a history professor is supposed to do nothing, a certain not too much, but a certain degree of intelligence is required. Okay, there are different ways of doing nothing. Okay, in order to be a spoke within that particular wheel, right? I mean, in order to do nothing, your position relative to the other moving parts of the bureaucracy of which you are a component has to remain constant, right? If you're literally doing nothing, if you just go to your office and literally sit there for 90 years, okay, then your position relative to the other components of this bureaucratic apparatus is not going to remain constant, right? But here's the point, and in order to maintain a constant relative position within the requisite bureaucracy, it may sometimes be necessary to have some intelligence. In some contexts, it may be necessary to have considerable intelligence. It is never necessary to have extreme intelligence. Okay? It is never. That is never the case. Occasionally, having extreme intelligence can help, but those occasions are fewer and further between. And obviously, there will be new bureaucracies, new educational bureaucracies in which they are not as few and far between. Presumably that's already happening. But basically, look, when you're in a democracy, sorry, boy, that was another Freudian. When you're within a bureaucracy, and that is a Freudian slip worth talking about, actually. I in case you didn't hear, I said democracy instead of bureaucracy. But when you're in a bureaucracy, climbing the ranks is about doing nothing. And this is obfuscated by the fact that there are different ways of doing nothing. And to somebody who's not a part of the bureaucracy, somebody who is a member of that bureaucracy who is doing nothing seems to be doing something, but he's actually not. What he's doing is simply treading water. And now here's the thing, which is that so you could join the army and then just kind of climb the ranks. I mean, okay, that's fine. And you have to do nothing. You literally have to do nothing. If you're a hero on the battlefield, that's great, but it's not going to help you get promoted at all. At all. It will not. It may help you in other ways, but it will not help you get promoted because those are different fields of endeavor. And if you join a law firm, people think that lawyers are smart. Now, this is really very false. Lawyers are one notch above average. Sometimes they're two notches above average. Maybe 50 years ago, there were a few who were of extreme intelligence. But and if there are any who are of extreme intelligence now, which there are not, but if there are, their intellectual faculties, their strengths of intellect are so utterly unaccompanied by any strength of character that they are so utterly deracinated and without connections to human existence in its entirety that they might as well that it actually doesn't really that functionally their intellects end up being two-dimensional. So even if they have intellects that considered as intellects are in fact quite powerful, those intellects are operating in such a vacuum of emotional context that they end up in effect not being all that powerful. Anyway, but so if you want to climb the ranks in a law firm, or even if you start your own law firm and you're kind of pseudo entrepreneur in that way, if you want to climb the ranks within the legal system, it's still about doing nothing. Okay, you don't. I understand people think that, oh well, lawyers kind of go into court and they clutch the Bill of Rights and they come up with these great arguments. That's not what happens. Okay, they are basically, what they do is, it's what they're trying to do is they want to maintain good relations with the prosecutor, with the judge, and you know usually the client is guilty of something. 95% of the time, it's some purely statutory offense, and driving without a license or being in possession of narcotics or some such. And the client is looking at some absurdly inflated sentence, and then the defense attorney says, okay, well, we pled it down to 36 months probation, and the client thinks that the lawyer is some wizard. Well, no, that's just part of the scam. And lawyers in this day and age, I think it was a little different a while ago, but do nothing. Just do nothing. Now, here's the thing, which is that when you're dealing with, in order to become a real captain of industry, I think you could become kind of an undistinguished member of upper management. You could become a lower upper manager. You could be a deeply undistinguished board member, perhaps, without doing much. You could become a kind of very undistinguished executive and do nothing. That is true. In fact, that's perhaps very common. Maybe that's the norm. But you couldn't really become a captain of industry in any sense, even in a small way, without doing something, without, in fact, perpetually doing something. You cannot become a politician without doing something. You really cannot. Because there's not, there isn't really an institution there. I mean, there is the government, but the government is not like a law firm, right? It's more similar to a kind of e-commerce platform, right? I mean, there are norms, and there are, and some entities and some people have more power than others, and so on and so forth. But there isn't just some one person or some one tiny little group of people who, if you placate them, you can simply climb the ranks. As a professor, as long as you're not retarded, well, as long as you have an IQ of 115 or whatever, if you just kind of keep your head down, smile, and toe the line, you will steadily climb the ranks. That's it. If you're a lawyer and you have an IQ of 105, and you keep your head down and you don't insult the judge, and you are judicious about what kinds of cases you choose and how to plead them out, when to plead them out, when to make a show of defending your client, when to actually defend your client, that sometimes happens, you will climb the ranks. And you cannot become a senator that way. I don't know this, but I'd be a little surprised, just because there are, there is more than one party, and you probably could climb the ranks of a given political party. You can certainly ingratiate yourself to the members of any one organization, but the thing is that there are other organizations that are going to be screwed. If you're, let's say you climb the ranks of the Democratic Party, well, there are other parties, and they will take the Democratic Party to task if it's headed by total goofs, and that's going to have a certain tempering effect on who it is that actually climbs the ranks. I understand the top brass in any given political party are often deeply unimpressive, but they are unimpressive relative to a relatively high standard. Okay, these are facts. Okay, so certainly in business, even if you are running a pizza parlor, I mean, you do have to do something. You certainly have to do a lot to start it, and you have to do something to keep it going. So again, this is not to say that politicians are as good at what they do to deserve these. This is not to say that they are actually good at looking after the interests of the people who put them in office, or the people whose interests they're supposed to look after. But they do have to do something, and a solid 96% of the population cannot do anything. And the belief to the contrary is based on a failure to understand the philosophical point that there are different ways of doing nothing. It's one thing for a rock to do nothing. It's a different thing for a person to do nothing.